It doesn't matter if you didn't get to talk about XYZ topic until you were 16. There's a good chance that your kid has heard about it at 11, has heard about it at 12. Have those conversations. Create that precedence. This is the Better Dad Project podcast, a place for imperfect dads who want to do better and help each other along the way. Hey everybody, this is Brigham. Once again, welcome to my podcast. Welcome to this Better Dad Project where we all learn to do better. That's our goal. And we help each other to get there. What I know collectively, guys, we have so much power. And today I just want to touch a topic that's hard. It's difficult. Not only because sometimes it's hard to ask certain questions, but often it's going to be hard and it's going to be terrifying to hear the answers. But these are things that we have to do. I always feel like, good dad isn't just about giving your kids the best of everything that you can, but it's also doing the hard things, doing the uncomfortable, pushing past that comfort zone to make sure that we're doing the best that we can for our kids. We are dads who try. We are dads who constantly try. We're not giving up, but we often feel inadequate. And I submit to you, I want you to consider this. The reason why we feel so inadequate is because our standards are so high that we're going to constantly feel like we don't measure up. Our standards for being a dad and for doing the best that we can, like we have this image of what we wish we could be, and we're not there yet. And most of the time, we probably will never get there just because of how being a parent works. First you have kids, babies when you never had babies before. And then they're 5, then they're 10. And you go, I've never had a 5-year-old before. I've never had a 10-year-old before. I've never had a 14-year-old before. And so, as life changes, we're always going to feel like we don't know what we're doing and we're messing it up. But this is the thing. It is in that same feeling of inadequacy where we can take refuge. The reason why I feel so inadequate is because I want to be up here. This is what my kids deserve. My kids deserve the best, right? Not just the best of everything that I can give them, but the best of me. And then it's in that inadequacy that allow us to keep trying, to never be satisfied. And I think that's the key. As long as we're never satisfied with who we are as a parent, as a father, then we're always going to keep striving. We're going to acknowledge our mistakes. We're going to try to learn from them and then do better the next time around. So anyways, let's talk about these hard questions, what they are, how I've approached them. And I hope in my next episode, we can have somebody here that can go through these questions with me so we can have different perspectives and points of view. Because at the end of it, only collectively is how we can achieve this goal of doing better. Okay, so let's dive into these hard questions, or into the concept of hard questions. We have to have the ability, the courage to speak these questions and to get a true answer from our kids. And this is where it can get a little bit tricky. See, our kids will communicate with us according to the emotional currency that we have built with them and the way that we react. So young parents, pay a lot of attention to what I'm about to say. The way that we react to everything they do, whether the mistakes that they make are small or big, is what guides them. It creates this pattern in the psyche as to how they will deal with the situations. Will they downplay a mistake, or will they just be quiet about a big mistake because they don't want to see you blow up? They don't want to hear you lecture. Okay, guilty. Sometimes we get so terrified of our kids making certain mistakes because we are afraid that we won't be there next time they make it. As if they won't learn from it. But we're so afraid of them making mistakes, when we're not there to fix it for them or to step in for them, that, we can get mad. We can lose our temperament a little bit. And every time we do, our kids become a little bit more afraid of the next time. And the thing is that the mistakes will come. The only thing that can vary is the way that we choose to react to said situations. So, if your kid failed a class and you blow up, you demean them, or you punish them in a very harsh way. Well, guess what? It doesn't mean that all of a sudden they're going to get good grades next time, because that it is work. But it does mean that they might try to cheat. That means that they might try to do whatever they can so that this conversation doesn't come up, because you don't have the emotional currency with them to be able to have certain conversations. So imagine now you got to have the talk, right? The birds and the bees, maybe the drugs talk, or maybe the all important question of, hey, are you happy? And as important as it is for us as dads to have the courage to ask these questions, we have to have created an environment, or have to go and try to build up from the rubble that we might have created with our mistakes in the past. We have to create an environment where our kids feel safe, not just answering, having that conversation with us, but also giving us the truth, giving us true answers, giving us details. Imagine you ask your kid in a very simple manner, hey, are you happy? And they go, yeah. And you go, right on. If you went to your boss and you said, hey boss, am I doing all right in my job? Do I have a job for next year? And he goes, yeah. How secure would you feel? Probably not very. Hey wife, are you still in love with me? Yeah. You still love me? Yeah. Okay. Exact same scenario. There is something there that needs to be brought up. But if they've made a mistake, something that they're embarrassed about, something they're ashamed of, or something that they know that they've let us down, and they're afraid of having and saying it, because we're going to react the way that we always do. We're going to blow up, and we're going to lecture them. We're going to, again, punishment in a harsh manner, whatever that is. Everybody's different. Then how can we really have it? So before we set out to ask and demand this information from them, we have to know that trust has to be built. In my previous episode, we spoke about this, about how important it is to have trust, and how our relationship hinges on trust. Not only that we can trust them to make good choices and to be good, but that they can also trust us, that when things happen, as they will, because they're children, and they become teenagers, they'll make other mistakes, and some of those are quite meaningful and life-changing. Do they trust that with all of our unconditional love, that we're going to be there for them? Not just to punish them, not just to teach them to know better, but will we be there to catch them when they fall? Are we going to be the safety net that they need? Now, if you say, well, I never made those mistakes, I know I was good, I did this, blah, blah, blah. Hey, congratulations. You're not your kid, and you didn't grow up in the world that your kid is growing up right now. In fact, you couldn't even imagine the world that is today when you were a teenager. Heck, most of us couldn't imagine this world today 5 years ago, 3 years ago, right? So, trust. If you want to be able to ask those hard questions, you got to develop that trust with them. And if you're young, you have little children, maybe toddlers, infants, you have time. Okay, build up that emotional currency with them, so that when these questions come up, there's trust and they can tell you absolutely everything. If you don't have it, because like me, maybe you blew up sometimes, maybe you did some things, you reacted in some ways that make your kids afraid of making mistakes, then there's still time. There is huge power behind the words, I'm sorry. I don't believe our kids expect us to know everything. I do believe our kids expect us to do our best. I'm going to leave it at that. So what are some of those hard questions that you need to have with your children? That'll be my actionable point for today. It doesn't really matter what age they are. You may say, well, my kid is 2 years old, 3 years old. How much trouble can they be getting into? Start getting into that habit of asking those questions. And when they're little, their questions, their answers might be silly, might make you laugh. They may seem insignificant. But what you're doing is you are actually building a habit and sort of building a habit of expectation. So when the time comes, then it won't be weird, right? Like it's always like with us. When you were growing up, at some point, maybe your parents asked you a question or they offered something and you go, why do you ask? Or like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? You're never this nice. Or you've always said no to this, but why are you letting me do this now? Let's create that habit as early as we can. So when you get to when they get to a certain age and you ask, hey, are you happy? Tell me about your friends. Hey, what goes on in school, in your life? Are you happy? What do you think about this? It doesn't seem like an odd conversation. Like a little topics and a little chats will be awkward between you and your children, because that's just the nature of parents, especially as they get, I'm finding out as they get into that teenagehood, some conversations tend to feel a little bit more awkward. Some of those conversations that need to be had. At some point, you have to have the chat of, sexual relations, the meaning behind those, the putting it all into context. And it can seem very, very hard. It can seem very awkward. It can seem embarrassing. And you'll be tempted to always put it off for next year or for next week. And you'll never get to it. So start early. And then if you're at the point where you've never had those conversations with them, have them communicate. Perhaps the only way that we can do it at this point is to start changing the dynamics. Maybe start with smaller questions. Start with bringing up certain topics that you usually don't. And then let them talk. One mistake that I've made for so much of my life is to get into the habit of lecturing. I assume that I know so much, and because they were so young, they knew so little. And again, life experiences and some of the things that I've lived have given me different perspectives. And I'm trying to just inject everything I can into them. And I fall into that problem or into that trap of talking, lecture. And eventually they realize that and they just shut it off. So maybe start with some simpler questions. Hey, tell me about your friends. What are your friends like? Do you have one that gives you trouble? Hey, do you have anybody that picks at you at school? Just create some conversation, some more serious topics, and let them talk. Just listen to them. And then up the ante a little bit more. So that way, when you do get to some of those serious questions, so many things that our kids are exposed to nowadays, so many topics, you need to have those conversations with them, but build it up, right? That way, when you get to that, let's say that the drugs questions, hey, have you tried drugs? Do you do drugs? Do your friends do drugs? It doesn't feel like an examination of their character. It doesn't feel like a straight out interrogation to find out what's wrong with them. It's just a conversation out of concern. And then just always remember, they have to know that you love them, that everything you do is out of love and out of concern. As long as you do that, and as long as they understand that, but more importantly, as long as they trust you and they feel that it's out of love and concern, and because of that trust, they believe you that it's out of trust and concern, those conversations will happen. They will open up to you, and it can still be awkward, but it can be successful. Just because a conversation feels weird and it feels awkward, it doesn't mean that it can get the job done. So my action point for everybody, if you're watching this week, is choose what's one of those hard questions that you want to ask your kid, not just because it might be time, but because there might be no better time than right now. Our kids are growing so fast, and they're growing in a world that's advancing even faster. They need your experiences. They need your knowledge. It doesn't matter if you didn't get to talk about XYZ topic until you were 16. There's a good chance that your kid has heard about it at 11, has heard about it at 12. Have those conversations. Create that precedence. Because once you had this conversation right here, the next one will be easier. And then the next one will be even a little easier than the previous two. Before you know it, you're having open, candid conversations with your children. Careful how you react. Careful at the level of lecture that you want to, maybe you may feel like you need to take over the conversation and disseminate all the information that you have in your brain. Make it a conversation about them. Let them talk. Okay, hear them out. I promise you it's going to be one of the best things that you do. So, anyways, friends, Brigham Miraeta here at the Better Dad Project podcast. Signing off, and until next week, guys, I'm going to leave you with a few dad jokes for you to enjoy. Tell your kids and tell your wife. I love to see my wife roll her eyes when I tell her those jokes. So here you go, guys. Have a good week. Bye-bye.